and welcome to The Real Deal with Dee and Denise. I am Dee.
And I am Denise.
And today we are going to talk about the update with domestic politics. I know there's a terrible and deadly war that is raging in the Middle East right now, and we're going to have another episode that is dedicated to that. But today we're going to talk about what's the deal at home. So, in our last episode, we talked about the Speaker's debacle and the Republican dysfunction in the House. So, before we jump into those updates, it should be noted that the vote for the Speaker is supposed to take place at any time, and it is a developing situation, so things may have changed by the time you hear this, but most of the information will still be really relevant and important either way. All right, so let's jump in. The House has now been leaderless for over a week, and it's grappling with its fractured state following McCarthy's removal as Speaker. Before we talk about those developments, let's talk about some of these real-world consequences that we're already feeling as a result of this paralyzation of our government. So among those, we obviously know that there is a big deal going on in Israel right now. Ukraine is still fighting this war. There was an earthquake in Afghanistan. And the House does not have a speaker and is not able to appropriate any fundings or pass any resolutions or do anything about it because they don't have that speaker. And on top of that, there are key ambassador and security positions that are also vacant. And there was no one that can vote on it because the House is not in session. And on top of this, our military readiness was already down. We talked a little bit last week about the attacks our military has experienced by Trump and by his supporters. But at the same time, Tommy Tuberville, who is a representative, has been holding up nominations for really, really key military positions over a federal law that would pay travel reimbursements to people who were seeking health care or abortion access in a state that it was not legal. So if they had to travel to another state to get the health care they were seeking, the government would pay for that. And that's a federal rule that has existed for a long time. But Tommy Tuberville is, in fact, holding up military nominations for key positions anyway. So while the world is in need, Republicans are playing politics, spreading misinformation, and we're going to dive into that. But Denise, let me just get your thoughts on the chaos and consequences that are unfolding as a part of this unprecedented move by extreme far-right faction in the Republican Party to remove its own speaker, which is something that not only has it never been done at all in history, it's never been done by someone's own party. So, Denise, what are your thoughts?
What this does is it shows now for sure that people, when we get into these positions or place people in these positions, we're not understanding what these positions really are there for. Because if we understood what the role of a speaker really is, we wouldn't have been so quick to want to just, even though Kevin McCarthy sucked, we wouldn't have been so quick to want to kick him out without having things firmly in place, understanding the consequences of doing such. A lot of people do not even know that the speaker is third in line in the presidency. They don't even realize that if something were to happen to the president and the VP, the Speaker of the House is it. Yep. And this shows that we need more. We have to put the right people in place. So this becomes hyper partisanship. You can't do that because really, to be honest with you, if we were really wanted to put the right speaker in place right now for this moment, Hakeem Jeffries would be in place. That's who would be in place. If we had the country at heart, if we had American citizens at heart, we would forget about D and R's and I's. We would put the right person in place for this time, and it definitely would be Hakeem Jeffries. And I'm sick about this now. Right before we came on, luckily Jim Jordan lost, and they have nominated Steve Scalise. The process is not over, but definitely Scalise has his issues because with his alignment with David Duke. Democrats have said that at times he have tried to reach across the aisle and at least be somewhat civil, at least give the appearance of trying to be somewhat bipartisan on certain things. So That's where we are right now.
He may at least give the appearance, but it does not look like reaching across the aisle worked out so well for McCarthy. So if Steve Scalise is the next speaker, we will see how that may work out for him. I think Hakeem Jeffries would be a much better option. Then Democrats really only need 5 Republicans to agree with them and say, you know what, I'm not having this anymore, for Hakeem Jeffries to become the speaker. I don't know if it's possible in that world, because if
It's
they
not.
were to do that, they would have to just leave the Republican Party at that point, either get out of politics or try to be a Democrat, which we don't want them either. So
We don't want them
um,
now.
I don't know exactly how that will work out, but we will dive deeper into it. First, I want to talk a little bit about some of the Republican misinformation that has also been being peddled right now in the face of a global tragedy that they're using as an opportunity, which, you know, disgusting is how I feel about that. But many Republicans have been peddling the false claim that the United States gave $6 billion in taxpayer money to Iran, which was then supposedly used in connection with this horrible attack on Israel by Hamas. And to say all money is fungible actually does have some merit. However, it is completely inapplicable to this situation. The truth is that the US did not provide $6 billion to Iran. Iran received around $6 billion from South Korea for oil and gas, a transaction that was then frozen due to United States sanctions. Then in September 2023, the Biden administration facilitated the release of those funds as part of negotiations to free American prisoners that were being held in Iran. And then those funds would be moved through the European and Qatari banks. And the US would maintain strict monitoring, allowing Iran to use that money solely for humanitarian purposes. And all transactions must then be approved by the US Treasury. And regarding Iran's involvement in the Hamas attack, while Iran has supported Hamas in the past, there is no direct evidence at this time connecting Iran to the specific offense. U.S. intelligence has not indicated Iranian direction or involvement in the attack at all. So, in summary, the claim is that U.S. funding Hamas via the $6 billion payment to Iran is completely false, and Iran's exact role in the conflict still remains uncertain. Denise, we'll return in a moment to the speakership stuff and who might emerge, but let's get your thoughts on the peddling of this misinformation, again, in the face of a global tragedy that we're seeing by Republicans.
It is really just, sometimes it's hard to just even grasp the concept of why we constantly have to put partisanship into everything, no matter how deep the tragedy. You have women, children, just innocent people losing their lives right now, and the possibility of Americans losing their lives, because we know that Hamas is
Actually,
threatening also.
22 Americans have been confirmed dead now.
Have already been confirmed. Now listen at that. Already confirmed dead. And
Yep.
then they're also threatening to go on video with hostages and
Yep.
and possibly kill them on video. And so here we are trying to use this as an opportunity to pin this thing on President Biden, because this looks like it could be politically good for them for 24. If we could say, oh, look, Biden caused this over there because of the money that he, allowed to funnel to Iran, caused the death and destruction and all of this stuff over there in Israel, and all of this loss of life and destruction over there. We always, no matter what the tragedy is, have to put hyper partisanship in the midst of everything that happens, because we're looking ahead to power. Power. Everything that we do in this country anymore is about the thirst for power and money. And I'm telling you, this is sad to me, because people, the loss of life here is unimaginable. What is to come, because it doesn't look like there's going to be, anything that's going to stop this thing anytime soon. Now, the United States has pledged no boots on the ground. I don't think the United States is going to get directly involved at the moment, but we're standing by watching. and we don't know if we may be pulled into this thing at some point.
Well, again, the US is a bit paralyzed right now. Um, we cannot enter into conflicts without congressional approval, and there's not a Speaker of the House who would be able to do that. Even the bipartisan resolution that was put forward regarding Israel is not able to be passed or get on the floor, heard, talked about, because again, this speakership has remained open for over a week at this point, and it has currently just went back into recess again because they were not able to find someone that was going to be able to take over. So we'll just jump into that now to give a bit of a background. On the last episode, we talked about some potential candidates for Speaker: Jim Jordan, Steve Scalise, even Donald Trump. So just to put the Donald Trump thing to bed really, really quick, after Kevin McCarthy's removal as House Speaker on October 3rd, there was speculation about whether former President Donald Trump could take the role of Speaker since, as we said, you don't have to be a House member to be Speaker. And some House Republicans did nominate Trump for the position. However, there were concerns that Trump's legal challenges might disqualify him due to the House rules. So we have confirmation on that now. Rule 26A for the GOP, for the Republicans, and Rule number 4 for the Democrats state that a person under indictment cannot hold the Speaker's position. Nevertheless, though, these rules aren't legally binding and can be disregarded or changed by the House as they're self-imposed and self-enforced. So in summary, there are rules against an indicted person becoming Speaker, but these rules are flexible and subject to change, meaning Trump's eligibility could depend on political dynamics. But regardless, Trump has actually endorsed Jim Jordan. So I think it's safe to count Donald Trump out of the speakership, at least for now. And even Jim Jordan is no longer running. So we'll get to that again in a second. But what thoughts do you have?
You know, with everything that's already going on, the last thing we needed to do was having to deal with him in the role of Speaker of the House. If you talk about chaos, this wouldn't have been chaos with a CH. It would have been chaos with a K, because that is just how wild and crazy things would have been had he gone into that speakership. And also there was a few rumors that Kevin McCarthy had changed his mind, that he may throw his name back
Back
into the
in the
ring.
ring.
So I'm like, can we get some sense of normalcy, some semblance of normalcy back in the House? Just a tiny bit, because it's a complete clown show. And this is not good right now, especially when our allies are depending on us. But I do want to, just for a second, in looking at this and talking about our allies, I'm hearing from, I read something from Egypt. Dean, I don't know if you've seen this. You probably have, because you stay up on these things. But Egypt is saying that Bibi is aware for weeks of this threat, this dire threat from Hamas about this potential attack, and that they alerted him because they had gotten some intel about it, and they warned Netanyahu many times about it, and he obviously did nothing. And so there's all this speculation now and rumors about why did he not act upon this weeks ago. And of course, you got the rumor mill out there, and you got the conspiracy theories out. But we have to get the House back in order. I just don't know what else to say. Donald Trump has too much of an iron grip on those people over there.
We do need to get the House back in order. Again, we're completely paralyzed right now. To your point about Egypt saying that they did have advanced information and that they let Bibi know about it, I do not have enough information to make any definitive claims or assertions about it. However, what I would add is that I was personally confused about the massive intelligence failure that allowed this attack to not only take place, but take place in a way that they were so unprepared for, because they did not have troops in the South, really. They had a lot of troops in the settlements. They were focused a lot on that area. And so, again, I was personally confused by the massive intelligence failure, especially because the Israelis are seen by the global community to have one of the best intelligence agencies in the world. So for them to not know about such a large scale coordinated attack
Yes.
was surprising to say the least. Bibi, as you may know, was prime minister for a bit and then facing corruption charges. He was no longer prime minister. Then 18 months later, he built an extremely far right coalition
Yeah, yes.
in order to get himself back into power. And Bibi said that he was going to control the agenda, but that really isn't what we've been seeing since he's taken back office with the most far right coalition Israel has ever seen. The Israeli people, though, have been rallying in the streets for months, showing massive displays of public protest about Bibi's corruption scandals, about his attempted judicial coup, about the far right members of his cabinet that he's putting into place. So, again, I'm not making this assertion.
This is what I've been reading for the last couple of days, that this is why he has not taken an active approach to this information. And I don't want to believe that at all. I do not want to believe that.
If that is the case, that is absolute reckless disregard for the lives
Absolutely.
of his own civilians and citizens. But nothing can justify the absolute terror that Hamas is raining down. And nothing happens in a vacuum. Again, nothing can justify the terrorist attack that was perpetrated by Hamas, but to look at that as an isolated incident and not as an escalation of an ongoing conflict is, I don't know the word, but to me, that is just not an appropriate way to look at the situation, and it disregards history and context. And again, there is nothing that can justify it, but having an understanding about the things that lead to this kind of atrocity and tragedy is the way that we can help avoid it in the future. Because if we respond impulsively and with excessive force, all we're going to do is further radicalize people who already want to do harm. And I think the US has a personal experience with that. And I would hope that at some day we begin to look at history with a more critical lens so that we stop making the same mistakes over and over and over.
Oh gosh.
But okay.
Amazing point. That's an amazing point. Incredible.
Thanks. So this is a heavy conversation, and I implore listeners to listen to our special emergency episode that dives deeper into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the unfolding events. But I would like to jump back in and talk about our domestic updates and what's going on with the speaker. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we do that, Denise?
I think that, we're pretty much up on that. We just have to wait and see now what happens with Scalise's nomination and
Mm.
see, if he can get, enough votes to pull him on in as speaker, which I don't think there's going to be a problem because they certainly, even though.
I'm not sure, actually. It's considering the House went back into a recess today, maybe signaling that we are in for another McCarthy-like fight, another 15 rounds, another historic thing in the House, perhaps.
Well, you're making a good point because Taylor Greene already says she will not vote for him.
Well, I guess we'll have to see where that plays, how that plays out. In a recent closed-door Republican meeting, Steve Scalise did secure the Republican Party's nomination for the House Speaker, getting more votes and defeating Jim Jordan, who has, as a result, actually pulled his own nomination
Barely
out of
got
the
it.
race. Yeah, barely. I was
Barely got
surprised
it.
to see that not only did Jordan give up the fight, something that McCarthy did not do when he was in the position, he actually threw his backing now behind Steve Scalise. So I don't know if that's going to have any kinds of major impacts, but that's yet to be determined. Divisions within the party just cast serious uncertainty. In fact, the House convened at 3 p.m. today, Wednesday, October 11th, and immediately went into recess, another recess that could extend for hours or even days. So Scalise, like you said, narrowly won the party's election in that closed door vote among Republicans, again highlighting that party's fragile unity and complete disarray. If Scalise's nomination were to proceed to make it to the House floor, he would need to secure a majority of 217 votes if everyone's present. But again, that's a tall order considering the events that have led us here to begin with. And he's also in a current battle against blood cancer. And so, that's sad.
I forgot about that part. I forgot about the sickness. And I want to say this right quick in regards to him. That year when he was shot, I remember
2017.
as much as I can loathe some of those in the GOP, I remember feeling so saddened when he was shot and reading how he had to literally drag his body on the ground because he was writhing in pain and didn't know whether he was going to live or die. And just reading about what he experienced when he was shot, I was just felt so. At that point, I did not see a party affiliation.
Right,
I saw a human being
affected by gun violence.
And it was like a gut punch, and I felt so horrible that he had been shot, and
he still walks with a limp today.
Still walks with a limp, and no sooner than this guy kind of gets better, he comes right back like he never left. But nevertheless, I wish there was some way that people would agree to make our government more stable to where we could work better. It is so bothersome because we're getting nowhere. And then all it takes is for me to go run in front of a camera and tell a bunch of lies to people who want to hear my lies. And I know they're not true, but they're going to eat that up because I'm going to tell them just what they want to hear. And it's just, I look at this sometime and I say, did I fall off of a truck and hit my head? Am I still alive? Is this for real? This is not when I was in high school in this civics class, a government class. And let me tell you this right quick, and then we can move on. But I remember when I really first started getting into government and all of that stuff. I was a senior in high school, and I'm going to tell you how I did it. And I would, right before I got old enough to vote, so shortly before my 18th birthday, and Ronald Reagan was the president at that time. I just aged myself, yes, for whoever's listening. So we're sitting in it was civics class, and those who were old enough to vote were saying, "Oh, I'm gonna vote." And so people say, "Well, he's the devil, don't you?" And people are saying, same Democrat Republican thing. It was like, no, he's really the devil because of his name. And they said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, his name is Ronald Wilson Reagan, and all three of those names have 6 letters." And so there's the 666 thing, right? And so right away when they did that, everybody in the class started, you could tell everybody's counting their names, right? And the only other person in the class who came up with 6 letters in all of their names was who? Yours truly. So, because my name is Sandra Denise Newton. Yeah, I was still Newton back then too. Newton, right? And that's how I started paying attention to Ronald Reagan, which that's when I really started to get into politics and government and all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, that was my introduction, 666. How about that? I was thinking this guy who was Hollywood, been in the movies and stuff, that was a cool guy. Until I found out, yeah, he really is the devil. Because he's the one who dubbed that welfare queen thing and, had no idea he was like that.
Reagan cut taxes on the rich by over 50%. And we have been suffering ever since. We are still feeling the effects of the Reagan administration today. And you know what? That could be my deal of the week every week. I just can't let it go, Denise. Okay. So To give a little bit more background on Steve Scalise, for those who might not know, Steve Scalise, this is a man who referred to himself, and this is a direct quote, as David Duke without the baggage. And if you don't know who David Duke is an outright white supremacist, anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist, and former Grand Wizard of the KKK.
Yes.
And this is a quote that Steve Scalise used himself as a selling point. So, I really wonder what Tim Scott, the I have been discriminated against, but America is not a racist country guy, has to say about that. But Denise, what are your thoughts?
Oh my God. I remember, when I looked at that again today before we came on about Scalise and the fact that he could become the next speaker, it just made me think about how the little advancements. I know we've made progress in this country, but we have not made enough progress, because you can't tell me that a man who refers to himself in such a way as a selling point is empty of all that now. That he's emptied all that out, and I'm, walking the straight and narrow now. That's so behind me. And this is a man, because when you come into these positions of power like that, you are representing everybody in this country, not just one group. You are Speaker of the House. You're there for the good of everybody in this country. And it just really, these are the things that make me really absolutely hate politics. I wish we would get back to being about the people's business. But looking at Steve Scalise, I just don't see, even if he's the one that ultimately gets it, I don't see where anything good is coming from it. But he's going to be, we need somebody in that seat. So.
Right. We just need somebody at this point. Like, I have a mug from 2019 that says any functioning adult 2020. And like, I feel like that's what I need for the speakership. Literally any functioning adult. Please.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, we got a serious conflict going on. And who knows if the United States is going to get pulled into this thing, because this guy was speaking and someone was translating, and he was saying the United States better stay out of it. The United States is weakened. They're not who they used to be. Pretty much just to paraphrase, they don't want to screw with us, because if they do, we got something for them too. And I'm thinking.
But it also speaks to the ways in which Trump has diminished our global standing throughout the world. We talked about that briefly.
He said Biden.
Oh my gosh, new revelation. Talked about it briefly last week when we mentioned that, we're kind of like an embarrassment on the world stage. But we have, pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Accords. We are pulling the Kevin McCarthy, making deals with people and keeping none of them, at least when Trump was in office. And so, again, when people are supposed to look up to us and want to emulate us, and they look over here and see the state of our politics, of the violence, of just everything that's going on, it's really hard to make the case that we are still this country that people should emulate. And so if the U.S. really wants to have an impact and pull and say in these kinds of areas, it's really important that we're making sure our hands are clean before we do that. And right now, our hands are filthy.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. And that's terrible. I mean, and our democracy is just barely hanging on. We got people taking such a lazy approach to, well, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. So what do I care? I'm not voting. Whatever. Maybe they'll think differently if they knew what this country would look like devoid of a democracy.
Yeah, and last week we also talked a little bit about our education system and how it's really not meeting the standards that it should, and it has no mandated civics classes. I'm kind of thinking we need to have like a segment or like a separate episode, stuff you would have learned in civics class if you had it.
Would be, I think we should do that.
I think we should do it. Okay. All right, so moving on then. We've talked about the House updates, the speakership debacle, Republican peddling of misinformation, the deal with Steve Scalise. I saw a tweet the other day, and it was like, when you turn your bass up too high, you blow out your speakers. And I thought that that really kind of encompassed what was going on here because
That's good. That's good. I like
yeah,
that.
right. The Republican Party, politicians in the Republican Party have recognized where the base is now and the way that Trump has moved that base, and have an understanding that if they want to have a political career, that they're going to have to pander to this base. But I think there's something to be said about the responsibility of an elected official to play their part to defend the Constitution, to defend the United States from all enemies,
It's
foreign
foreign
and
and
domestic,
domestic.
regardless of whether or not they're on your party.
It is not because it's so about power. You got all these special interests and these lobbyists. So many of them are getting so much money from these people that they're beholden to them.
Mm,
And they have to toe the line.
mm,
I mean, look at the shenanigans of, and so and I mean,
right,
and in what civilized country are you able to stand flat-footed in front of a camera and talk ugly like they do about Sleepy Joe, Dementia Joe, this, that, and the other? This is your commander in chief, whether you want him to be or not. This
right,
is, I mean, even military people, you don't do that. I'm not
right.
understanding.
Most of the time that I was in the service, Trump was the commander in chief, and I was not vocal about it at the time, not because I didn't feel any kind of way, but because as a military member in a uniform, you're not supposed to do that. One, and for two, I had always like somewhat cared about politics, but it really wasn't until I was in the military and Trump came on the scene that I started to take a harder look about what was going on. So if I had to serve under former President Trump, and if I had to go through all of that and I wasn't allowed to say anything about it, you cannot be doing that about President Biden.
Thank you. It's madness to me. Um, it's really madness. I'm like, he's still the person that's in charge of this country, and the disrespect is shown towards him all the time. It is just it's unreal to me. And this man to me is still sharp, and he cares about our service members. He's never called any of them suckers and losers. Um, never said that our injured war veterans that have lost limbs, don't put them out in public. And nobody wants to see
Right.
that.
John McCain, who has since passed, God rest his soul or whatnot, but John McCain, who ran against President Obama, I fundamentally disagree with many of the ideas and policy proposals that McCain would put forward. However, it is an indisputable fact that he was a member of our military who put his life on the line and became a prisoner of war.
And
Um,
what he went through.
right. What he went through was unimaginable. And um, and Trump, this is a member, supposedly, of Trump's own party, and Trump attacked him even. And one of the most gross things he said was, I prefer people who don't get captured.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes. Yes. That made me nauseous because when I read McCain's story about how he was tortured and tormented and what actually happened, why he couldn't lift his arm only to a
Above his
certain
head,
height.
yeah.
And how they broke his arm and everything, they just really tortured him so bad. And when Trump said that, I was filled with rage because he's always showed such contempt and disdain for our military. But you want to
Right,
use our military folks as props and as backdrops when it comes to political things or re-election or whatever. You want to use our military. And when he said that about him, I prefer heroes that don't get captured in this stuff. You claim bone spurs not to even have to serve at all. I
Right.
mean, no, don't play with me. I mean, because I did, but nevertheless, I don't know where we're going in this country anymore. And it's like we're losing our standing around the world. Putin plays with us. That whole thing that happened uh, in Switzerland,
Helsinki. In
Helsinki.
Helsinki.
I can't get the image out of my head. I think if I live to be 500 years old, I'll never
Yeah.
forget that.
Not
They went into some room with just the translator where no one else was allowed in, and when they came out, he looked like a dejected child who had gone in with daddy and got a scolding. Trump, that is. He and Putin comes out like with his chest stuck out, and I'm like, what the hell? What is this?
I if you would have told me, I don't know, some years ago that I'd be sitting here defending John McCain or like, I don't know, Liz Cheney, I would have never believed you. And yet, here
Here
we
we
are.
are.
All right. So, I
Yeah,
don't
the thought.
want to cut you off. You have something else you want to say?
No, I was just thinking the thought of defending a member of the GOP, but anyway.
I know. I know. I know. If somebody on our side of the aisle did something completely corrupt, illegal, and morally bankrupt, that we would never be okay with it. And here we are showing that to you. In a
Yep.
recent indictment, U.S. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and his wife were accused of accepting cash, gold bars, a luxury vehicle, mortgage payments, and
No.
more in a corrupt relationship with three businessmen from their state, allegedly benefiting Egypt.
Democrats are right to say, get him out of here. Get him out of here. The governor of New Jersey is calling for his resignation. We don't need
Yeah, a
that.
lot of prominent Democrats have called for his resignation. And we're not prominent Democrats, but I think we both call for his resignation too.
Yes, yes.
Um, so,
Goodbye, sir.
exactly.
We're sick of
Goodbye,
you.
sir. He is up for re-election soon. So hopefully, if the Senate doesn't sort it out, or if he doesn't resign, hopefully the voters will make a good decision for us. So come on,
Yeah.
New Jersey, do the right thing. Hey, Denise. So I think we could go on for probably ever, but let's move on to our deals of the week.
Mm-hmm.
So our deals of the week are something, politics or otherwise, that we can't let go of. And as our listeners now know, I can never let go of how evil Reagan is. But that won't be my deal of the week this week. But Denise, let's start with you. Give me the deal.
Okay, my deal of the week is something I've been just paying attention to a lot lately. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's infuriating, sometimes it's indifferent. But you have these journalists who they're outside of like Trump rallies, or sometimes they're just like maybe out in communities and they'll see people that's wearing Trump paraphernalia, hats, t-shirts, flags, whatever. And they'll stop and they'll talk to them and they'll interview them. So two that I chose for today was to deal with. There was one where the journalist says to her, a woman wearing a hat that had the letters FJB on it, and we know that was F Joe Biden. How much of this, disdain or dislike or hatred towards Joe Biden is about owning the libs? And she says, "Well, I'm disappointed that our president has dementia and is incapable of running this country. Something has to be done about him. It's so embarrassing." And so the first thing that came to my mind was, well, a couple weeks ago, Donald Trump was talking, and he thought he had ran against Barack Obama. Excuse me, he had ran against Barack Obama. He alluded to the fact that he had at one point ran against George H.W. Bush. And so when they say about this dementia that Joe Biden has, and then I compare Trump when he's talking, and he can't say anything more than many people have said, many, many, very, very. That's how limited his vocabulary is.
I have good words.
Yeah, I have good words. And they're the same 3 or 4 words, mind you. I find it so hard to understand these people's have adulation for him, all this, how they can adore him and think he's so wonderful and great. And the man has he just seems to have the mindset of a preschooler to me sometimes. And I'm like, what is the deal with you supporters? What has he done, honestly done, to make you think he's done such great work in this country that you want him back so bad because he set this country so straight? And then the second group that was interviewed, it was two younger women. I would say somewhere between late 20s and late 30s, somewhere in that group. And the reporter said, "What does owning the libs mean to you?" Because that's a phrase that goes around a lot, owning the libs. So he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And yeah. And he says, "What does owning the libs mean?" And she's all adorned in Trump gear, hat, t-shirt. And she said, "It means to prove them wrong." And she says, "They're wrong about a lot of things. They don't mean to be wrong. They just don't know what's right." So the reporter says, "Well, give me an example of what." And she said, "Well, crickets, crickets. Well, crickets, crickets, crickets." She couldn't give him one example of what the libs believe that's wrong or they don't know that's right. She couldn't give one example. But when he first came to her, she was so, yeah, only the libs, but she couldn't give an example. What is the deal with these people? Where is all of this adulation and adoration coming from? Help me understand.
Denise, I wish I could make it make sense, but it would have to make sense to me for me to be able to do that.
I
One of my
can.
favorites was like when reporters were going around after the first special counsel stuff came out from the Mueller investigation, and they were like, "Oh, it didn't say anything, it didn't say anything," and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, have you read it?" And they were like, "Well, no, but Trump said what was in it," and he's like, "Yeah, but have you read it?" "No." "Okay, well, come back to me when you have that," because there's some stuff in there that I think you really might want to see. And to me, it just seems like they are trapped in this echo chamber of constant misinformation, and we don't have an education system that is equipped to handle these challenges. We don't have classes about information literacy. We don't, as we've mentioned, have mandated civics classes. I'm sure some high schools may cover it, but definitely not all of them, because again, it is not federally mandated. And as everything just continues to advance, especially technologically, just because of the times that we're in, this information literacy thing has become a much bigger deal. And so when you get so overwhelmed and so inundated with information, it can be really challenging to sift through and understand, what's true, what's not, what's a good source, what's a viable source, what's a really sketchy source, how does data collection work, so they're able to be, and sometimes to maybe no fault of their own. I know that sounds crazy, but they are listening to people tell them what they should believe. And I don't mean this as an insult, but I think that they lack the critical thinking skills, and that could be a testament to our school systems, to really think deeply about the information that they're getting and to question it and to have a good faith argument and discussion within themselves about whether or not that information is something that they should take aboard. Um, and so I don't know what the solution is to it. And I know everyone can just sit out here and talk about a problem without giving a solution, but I think it's a really difficult scenario, and I don't know how we fix it. But again, I think that some kind of information literacy needs to be at the forefront of education reform.
Oh gosh, that thank you for saying that, because I do believe that's where it starts and ends, right there. It is so disheartening to hear these people just blindly follow this man. He has no real platform. He says nothing about how he would make the country better or life better for them. they just blindly follow him.
Yeah. I would like to take a map of education by state, perhaps, and overlay it on Trump's support. And I have not done this. I don't know this to be 100% true, but I would wager that if we were to do that, the places where educational outcomes are lowest, Trump support is the highest.
Well, he said he likes the poorly educated. Those were his
He's saying
target
the
people.
quiet part out loud.
Yes, he likes the poorly educated, and I think that's one of the things that endears them to him is because he's all for the regular people.
Mm.
He's supposed to be a multi-billionaire, but he just loves the regular people. Really?
Small loan of $1 million. Yeah, that's what regular people get.
But he wants to take your Social Security check away.
He's a regular person with, as you said, the mind of a preschooler. Just to remind listeners that real preschool mentality he has. If you can recall 28, this is a direct quote from Donald Trump. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please tell him that I, too, have a nuclear button, but that it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works? Donald J. Trump, January 3rd, 2018.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, God.
And yeah.
Oh, my God. That sounds like a preschooler. He is. Oh, my God. But you want him to, you want the nuclear codes handed back to him, and to give him access to highly sensitive classified information once again.
Right. My button is much bigger. Oh yeah, let's give him that one.
Yours. Let's compare. Mine's bigger. Mine's bigger. Oh, God help us, Lord.
I'm glad that we can laugh about sensitive national security measures. It's really good. Love that for us. Love that for American politics.
Flippin' weirdo.
In another really not happy thing, I'll give you my deal of the week. So, in recent news, Olympic gold medalist Mary Lou Retton is currently battling a rare form of pneumonia, which has left her hospitalized in an intensive care unit. Her daughter, McKenna Kelly, has launched a fundraising campaign. However, it has already surpassed its initial. So she's launched this fundraising campaign to help cover the significant hospital expenses, as Retton is not insured. So she does not have health insurance. The specifics of Retton's condition have not been disclosed, as her family, wishes to respect her privacy during this time. So in light of her recent battle, the gymnastics legend, who is best known for her historic performance at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, is receiving an outpouring of support, which is, great. But it really is problematic to me that she needed that to begin with.
Right.
So Retton made history as the first American, not first woman, first American to win an Olympic individual all-around gold, earning perfect tens in her performance. Over her illustrious career, she also secured 2 silver and 2 bronze medals, becoming the most decorated athlete of the 1984 Olympics, and to induction into the International Gymnastics Hall of Fame in 1997. I'm sure today we're hearing a lot about Simone Biles. She has just also made history, landing a move that was, thought impossible. So it's actually going to be named after her now, which is great. And we also saw on a podium of winners 3 Black women for the first time. That has never happened. Mm-hmm. So really, really cool, awesome stuff happening over there. But again, what I just really wanted to highlight, I love talking about the positive stuff, but how are we in a position in this country where this astounding woman is in a position to need to ask for public support in order to pay her medical bills? And she isn't fortunate, obviously, for what's going on, but is fortunate insofar as she has a name. She did do all of these amazing things. It was probably easier for her to be able to gain this public support than it would be for you or for I to do that. And if she's having to do it, imagine the people that are living in this country that don't have those means, that are just suffering instead. And if we're going to tout that we are the richest, greatest country in the world, then I'm going to need someone to show that to me, because I struggle. I really struggle to understand how we can be in a position where people who need life-saving care are not able to afford it, and that creates a barrier to receiving it.
That's
When
right.
I was overseas in England visiting my boyfriend's family, I got really sick. I didn't have travel insurance. I used the VA to get my insurance in the US, but I didn't know if that was going to transfer. I didn't think I would need it. And I was like, how much do you know how much this is going to cost me? I'm not a UK citizen, so I don't think that I qualify to get the free healthcare here. I don't have travel insurance. Do you know what this is going to cost me? Because if it's too much, then I don't know if I can do it. I'm just going to need to get on a plane and try to get to the VA. And this doctor, I don't know, looked at me and with like some kind of expression that I really have never seen before. And he said, I don't know what happens over there, but here in this country, people do not pay for emergency health care. And so I agreed to go through with the surgery. And again, I was under full anesthesia, spent a night there. And the next day I checked out, and that was in February. $0.
Uh-huh.
Zero.
And the same thing could happen here if it wasn't for the greed.
Right. And, my boyfriend will tell you the NHS, the National Health Service is what it's called in the UK, is not perfect. But I, as an American, would do almost anything to have the not perfect NHS than what we have now. And the saddest part about it is that the United States actually has the best healthcare in the world, but it has the worst health outcomes. And the reason for that is because it's not equally accessible to all of its people. Sure, we have cutting edge technologies and we have places where people are coming up with these incredible advancements in healthcare, but not everyone has access to that. So if we are a country that has the best healthcare, which in fact we are, and I live in Pittsburgh, which is the Highmark, Blue Shield, and UPMC are both
Right.
headquartered in my city. We do have the best, we just don't have the best outcomes because so many people do not have access to it, and that's grotesque.
It is absolutely grotesque. My God. That is just sad. It really is. I know Skylar, my former radio host, you know who Skylar Jett is. He's well, you may not. He replaced Lionel Richie as leader of the Commodores, and he sang on the Titanic soundtrack and with Celine Dion and all that. But Skylar lives in Scotland now. But
Yeah, they might here one day.
oh, he would come over here quickly. All I gotta do, that's my big brother. All I gotta do is say, Sky, I need you to come on, and he would be here like boom. Oh, sure, Denise, I'll be right there. Just let me know. I can get Skylar on easy. That's an easy request. Um, he's in Scotland, and he had a heart attack during COVID because he had caught COVID real bad. He caught that cough so bad that he coughed himself into a heart attack. And when he told me that he almost died, but over there he had to have emergency surgery and everything, went to the hospital. Now 1 penny did he pay. Now I told him, I said, well, if you were in America, you'd have been dead, bro.
And like I could stomach, I guess, paying a little bit for like a checkup or like, something minor. But if it's a life saving, limb saving, or, otherwise important emergency, medical emergency, why should somebody have to decide between eating, keeping their home, becoming bankrupt over surviving or
That is
having
right.
quality of life?
You're right. And this is America.
And until we figure that problem out, we have absolutely no right to claim ourselves as the greatest country on earth.
We can't. We just cannot. You got to determine whether to take care of your health or pay your mortgage or pay your rent or keep your lights on. And it's all this corporate greed that's behind it.
Corporate greed. That's another episode we need to talk about, Denise.
This is what's ruining it all.
I know, it's always that, man. My boyfriend and I were just talking, and we saw this thing about how you can make like so much stuff out of hemp, walls, paper, and he was like, he thought you could do a lot of things with hemp. Like, why aren't we doing more? And I was like, oh, tale as old as time, baby. Corporate greed. We can just go right back and look at DuPont Paper Company and the alcohol industry teaming up. And it's now on schedule with heroin because somehow weed and heroin are the same thing. No, they're not, but they are in corporate greed because you know what happens if you smoke weed? You tend to drink less alcohol. So that was the alcohol industry's gripe. And then on top of that, DuPont Paper Company, hemp was better for the environment. It was quicker to grow. You could make more paper. And DuPont Paper Company said, you're not gonna take our monopoly away. So let's team up. And then that's when we get, that lovely movie Roofer Madness and this whole lobbyist campaign.
Oh my God. If it wasn't so crazy, it would be funny.
I know. We have to laugh because it's the only way we don't cry.
You're right. That's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
The absolute truth. Wow. Corporate greed, that's it. It's just ruining everything. Just ruining it. Everything.
Soil that. All right. So, this has been our Deals of the Week, and we appreciate you tuning in. So, new episodes will drop about every week. You can find us on social media and tune in wherever you get your listening at TheRealDeal_pod. Again, that's TheRealDeal_pod. And if you enjoyed our episode, please hit those like, share, and follow buttons to stay updated with The Real Deal every week. If you have some comments, we would love to hear about them.
Yes. Enjoyed, as always. I love it.